Now I would like to introduce somebody that a lot of you people from KW and probably lots of different places will know. Needs no introduction as well. Neil Hedley, who's going to talk about Radio is Dead, Long Live Radio. Let's do the hug part now.
That's the hug part now.
And again later, maybe too.
Oh, all right, good. Hey, listen, I just got word that the gig is going a little better than we thought it was going to. Everybody's going to need to kick in another couple of bucks. So you can see the people out at the front about that. Hey, I can't even tell you how excited I am to be here. This is a very cool thing. It's been an interesting time for me lately because you might have seen it about 3 summers ago. I was named as one of MSN.com's top 10 sexiest men in America. Okay, I wasn't expecting a laughing there, but thanks for that. No, actually, no. Okay, that's not exactly true. What it was is MSN named disc jockeys on the radio as one of the top 10 professions that you don't associate with having sexy people in it. And I am the reason that you don't associate having sexy people in it. Because I'll tell you what, I'm the disc jockey that is responsible, sorry camera guy, I should have told you I was going to do this, when people draw cartoons of me, I end up looking like a monkey. For those of you who have absolutely no idea what this is something that was drawn 15 years or so ago when we used to do a thing here in KW called the Poster Boy Campaign for Cool FM. And it involved, the reason that there's a tent and a sign and all that stuff and some monkey-looking guy is because I used to climb up on top of a billboard. Actually, it's 2 blocks from here where the billboard used to be. It's just on the other side of the train tracks. And I would live there in the tent for somewhere between 19 and 31 days as a fundraiser that we did for the United Way. Thank you. A guy named Brian Burke did an amazing job of continuing on with that after I moved to the United States for a long time. Just an unbelievable campaign, raised untold money for the United Way. It was a terrific thing. And actually, if you look at my Twitter profile, it says world record holder. And people will ask me, what's world record holder all about? It's because in 2007, in a little town just outside of New York City in Connecticut, I did that event for the United Way down there, and we set a world's record for the most money ever raised for a local fundraiser in the history of internet radio. Yeah, well, which was cool because it meant, like, we did ridiculous stuff. Like, we had the original cast of Beatlemania get back together and play a 2-hour live concert on our internet stream, and we had people donating money from all over the planet. It was crazy. But living on top of a sign for that long, that was the kind of radio stuff that I grew up on when I was a little kid. That was, I mean, but my whole idea of what radio was a little bit off anyway. We went, when I was 8 years old, my mom took me to England for 6 weeks. And I was constantly listening to BBC One. And I had it in my head, the way I thought radio worked. I thought a radio studio was like a beehive, okay? The DJ would sit in the middle. When the DJ was going to play a Beatles song, he would point through the glass to the Beatles, who would play the song. And then when the Beatles were over, he'd point through that glass to the Rolling Stones, who were going to play their song. So imagine my surprise as I get a little older, and I find out that the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all these people, they were never there. They were never even near the place. So shattered dream, shattered illusion. I'm going to shatter an illusion for a lot of the people in this room right now. If you are listening to the radio on the weekend, 90% of what you hear was pre-recorded by someone who is as far away from being in that studio right now as you are. I found this out the hard way because not too terribly long. How many people have heard of Bruce Springsteen? A couple of you. Okay, good. How many people know that Bruce Springsteen had a saxophone player named Clarence Clemons? A couple people. Good. Clarence Clemons, of course, about 3 months ago now, I think it was, passed away suddenly. And I found the information out through a friend of mine who's a sax player for somebody else's band in the New York area. And kind of got wind of it, and then watched as the rest of the internet sort of caught on. CNN's tweeting it on their breaking news feed. Rolling Stone is tweeting it. And then I realized There's no radio stations tweeting this. And I'm looking around. There's no radio stations have this on their Facebook page. I was working across the hall from one of the most legendary rock and roll radio stations in Canada. There wasn't a person there. And so they had a situation where one of the icons to the people who listened to their radio station was now gone. Clarence Clemens was a legend. He was as big as you get as a saxophone player. But now he's gone, and nobody that listens to rock and roll records on the radio is hearing about it from the radio because everybody's pre-recorded. And I found this interesting because I thought, okay, you got all these radio stations out there that have gone to the trouble of, I mean, they all have social media people on their staff. They got their Facebook page. They got their Twitter page. Nobody's talking about it. I was by what I could figure out, because I follow a buttload of radio people, I was one of the only live disc jockeys in North America that night. And so the stuff that was coming out on Twitter about Clarence Clemens being dead, most of it was coming from me. That's not a good scenario in the best of cases, because you don't want me disseminating information to the public. You just don't. But that was what was happening, because radio had kind of abandoned it. They did whatever they did, and they turn off their Facebook stuff when they leave the office on Friday. I'll be darned if you can get them to go back on Monday. This is an interesting thing, because you go back 10 years and 4 days from today, radio was social media that day that we all remember what day I'm talking about. Jeff, who is probably still in the room somewhere, will tell you, if he was in the Manhattan area, which I'm assuming, Jeff, you were, radio in New York City that day was all about nameless, faceless, anonymous people that you will never, ever hear of again coming on every radio station in the city and saying, my wife works on the whatever floor of that building, and I've never heard from her yet, and I don't know how to get a hold of her. And every radio station in New York City was like that all day long, and for the entire rest of the week. It was full of what we now have come to find as being commonplace on Twitter. There's at least half a dozen people in this room that I've had the conversation with. What would 9/11 have looked like on Twitter? Have you stopped to think about that at any point for a second? While you're digesting, just think about, so that day, 9/11, radio is social media. That's where people are going to connect with each other. Somewhere along the line in those last 10 years, radio has decided we don't need to be part of that conversation. But the problem is a lot of us are guilty of that on some level. How many people have ever gotten an auto DM from somebody that says, thanks for following me? I don't want to point any fingers. If you send the auto DMs and say, thanks for following me, I'm not blaming you. But that's not engaging. That's not connecting. That's not providing the kind of services that we were all, people are standing up here today and talking about how amazing it was that things were happening during Haiti. That's engaging. That's all of us talking to each other. That's all of us reaching out to people in a lot of cases that we don't know. That's all of us taking a second to stop and care. The auto DMs, the auto stuff, that's not so much engagement as it is autopilot. And so I stand here and I tell you that 90% of what you hear on radio all over the world is pre-recorded. So some of the stuff that we're doing on Twitter. And if it was as much of a downer for you to find out that your favorite radio show that you listen to on Saturday night or whatever is probably something that was recorded Wednesday or Thursday, there's probably someone on the receiving end of a conversation that has happened automatically that's wondering where the heck the other part of the conversation went. Thanks for having me over here. I can't even tell you how exciting it was to be a part of this, but I appreciate the time, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.